Hello, everyone out there, and welcome to the Arts Vote ATL District Forum for District 6. We're so glad to have you here. My name is Nicole Palmietto, and I am a volunteer helping to get these forums going so that we can all have arts supported in our community. I would like to introduce our moderator for tonight. That is Laura Flusci. She is the executive director of the Museum of Design Atlanta, or MODA. Under her leadership, the museum has been transformed into Atlanta's design hub, a leader in design thinking and STEAM education for youth, and a trailblazer in exploring ways that a museum can serve its community in the 21st century. While at MODA, Laura has curated a number of exhibitions, including Food by Design, Sustaining the Future, and Designers, Makers, Users, 3D Printing the Future. A classical archaeologist by training, Laura lived in Rome, Italy for 15 years, where she taught at the university level, excavated on the Palatine Hill, and was a co-founder of Institute of Design and Culture. She fiercely maintains that design is archaeology backwards. I would also like to welcome to the floor our two District 6 candidates who are here tonight, Katie Volpel and Alex Wan. All candidates were invited, and we did hear back from Courtney Didi. We have been in contact with her. Unfortunately, she was just unable to join us tonight. And I will bid adieu for the time being, go backstage, if you will, and hand it over to you, Laura.
Thanks so much, Nicole. Thank you also to Arts Vote ATL for all of the work that you're putting in to make these forums happen and to give our candidates time to tell us about what they believe is important in terms of the arts in the city of Atlanta, because it's a crucial conversation. So I'm grateful to be part of it and full of all the work that you guys are doing. So thank you. Let's kick things off here, Alex and Katie. First of all, welcome. Thank you for being here, both of you. It's good to see your faces on the screen. And maybe we'd start off with each of you taking about 2 or 3 minutes just to tell us a little bit about yourself and what compels you to run for city council. Katie, would you kick us off?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Arts ATL. I saw a bunch of amazing organizations that you guys are supporting and working with. And I have worked with some of these organizations before, so I'm excited to see their logos popping up and helping us have a voice in this election. My name is Katie Volpel. I'm running for District 6 City Council. I'm super excited to be on the ballot for November 2nd. I started in the community in 2016 in the Virginia Highland neighborhood after receiving my master's in architecture, just a quick little master's in architecture and community design. So I am a huge advocate of the arts and design, community design in our area is one of the most important things to me. I think is the foundation of everything else that we're going to be building upon. I started in 2018, joining the Civic Association after I felt like I should be involved in my neighborhood a little bit more. After feeling like my business district needed a little bit more help, I was working in the hospitality industry in Inman Park and thought that Virginia Highland could use a little bit of engagement and stimulation. So we kind of reinvigorated the business association there. We rebranded in 2020 after COVID and a few vacancies popped up. We are now the Virginia Highland District, and I'm running because a lot of the obstacles I come across while I'm storytelling on the ground is that people aren't feeling heard and they're not having any fun with the process. So I'm really here to help policy be more engaging and get more people involved so that we can have more voices represented.
Terrific, Katie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alex, how about you?
So hi, everybody. I too want to thank Arts Vote ATL for holding this forum for us to dive into and really talk about the importance of arts in our city and in our region. A little bit about myself. I am a 27-year homeowner in Morningside. I grew up in Stone Mountain, Georgia. I have an engineering degree from Georgia Tech and an MBA from Wharton Business School. Professionally, I am the executive director of Horizons Atlanta. We provide tuition-free summer enrichment programs to children from underserved communities. We focus on literacy, math, and swimming, and STEAM, which includes the arts in there. And we serve about 1,300 public school students every year, and really excited to be part of that. In terms of community service, I serve on the board of the Piedmont Park Conservancy, also served on the board of the Atlanta Regional Commission, as well as Invest Atlanta. Specific to this race, I think the most important piece of my background is that I served as the Atlanta City Council District 6 representative from 2010 to 2018. And during that time, I served as the Finance Committee Chair, City Utilities Chair, as well as Zoning Chair. Before I tell you why I'm running, just wanted to also add that having grown up in Atlanta, some of my first volunteer opportunities were in the arts. I distinctly remember a field trip from DeKalb County Public Schools to see The King and I at the Fox. And then shortly thereafter in high school, a bunch of us decided we wanted to usher there. And so that's what we did whenever we could. And then I also volunteered at Actors Express as an usher too. So I have a long history of just trying to support the arts however I can. The reason why I'm running, I think as we go around and talk with voters in the district and in the city, it's been very apparent to me that the city just feels like it's broken. It's kind of ground to a halt in terms of some of the core city services that we as taxpayers and residents and people who live, work, and play here expect and quite frankly deserve. Things around public safety, the fact that we don't feel safe in our neighborhoods, we don't feel safe in the business corridors, going to events. Sometimes just going to the grocery store, things are happening in broad daylight. And not only are people scared, there are whole parts of our city that are talking about leaving the city and breaking away from the city because of it. There's simple city services around trash pickup, around licenses and business permits and simple things like that it takes forever to get is really slowing our city down. And then just general quality of life things like infrastructure, potholes in the road that go unfixed for a long time. And this is just not how a city should be run. So the reason why I'm running is I feel like the experience that I have both professionally, civically, as well as public service and city council is exactly the kind of leadership and experience we need now to help right the ship and get things moving back in the right direction, particularly during a time when we're going to have a new mayor, a new city council president, and there are 6 council seats that will be turning, not to mention any of the other incumbents who have opponents that those seats might be flipping as well. So I do think experience is going to be important going forward. All you have to do is look at the 2 terms that I served. I mean, you know that I'm a fierce community advocate. I'm also, I show up to meetings prepared. I do my homework. I'm ready to deliberate the issues at hand. And I also have served ethically and with transparency. I was the first council member to publish all of my district funds, expenditures, transaction by transaction, so that folks would know where I was spending their tax dollars. I look forward to the conversation. Like I said, I think it's going to be fun exploring this particular topic, but I hope that I can, by the end of this session, I'll have earned your vote for the District 6 council position. So thank you.
Thanks, Alex. First, it's great to hear that we have 2 candidates speaking to us today that have lots of experience and background in the arts and culture and design, because that's important, especially for District 6, which is a district that is rich in arts and culture. And so the next question that I have for each of you, I'm going to turn into a little bit of a 2-part question. In thinking about District 6, as I said, we have a part of the city that's very rich in arts and culture, and that on some level is built on it. So I'd love to hear what you think, where you think, how you think the arts are positioned in District 6, but then how the arts can be leveraged to further improve the quality of life for people who reside in this district. And Katie, I'm going to hand it to you one more time here. We'll mix it up along the way then.
No worries. I know it's going to be hard with 2 candidates. One or the other. I think District 6 is doing well, and as a whole in general for the northeast of Atlanta. We have Piedmont Park, so we're blessed to have quite the amenities. We also have a lot of really engaged civic and business associations that help our communities really thrive and create that connection between residents, arts, and culture. I'm particularly of the small business support, and I believe that our small businesses bring a lot of culture to the table. So that's one of my main concerns going for this election. Also, I think the arts, I'm glad that you guys have this forum because they don't often get the conversation at the table. And I think that it's time to keep bringing them to the table, bringing everyone to the table with the businesses. I think we can all really work well together. And we need a leader that can bring us all together at the table. I believe we can take down some barriers for artists in our communities in terms of where we're going. I think Atlanta has a lot of great grant programs and accessories to the arts programs. I think a lot of them are privately led, and we can do a lot of leaning in to our theaters and our museums, our schools, even to have more art in our parks and along our business corridors. I think the Beltline can play a huge part in this as well. I've seen a few art projects go up in my neighborhood specifically, and I know that they do tend to take a lot of time and are very thoughtfully designed, which is much appreciated. However, I have been to some other grant program interviews and found that the threshold for getting any of the grants or getting any of the resources is actually quite high. And I think that we can do a lot better job of giving the resources and not just the training, and just having a more collaborative vision of the arts in our district and across Atlanta, actually.
So, yeah, you're right. We are blessed in District 6 to have kind of such high visible arts facilities as the Woodruff Arts Center that have really robust programs around performing arts, visual arts, even the musical arts, if that is such a thing. And so, that in and of itself is a nice asset to have, and also having the community around it that really supports it and really values it and has been there with those institutions from the beginning. So where I think we have opportunities, though, is that with that comes I think the responsibility to lead, and I view that in a couple of ways. Number one is, I think having that institution that is so well resourced, it should be kind of the flagship in terms of supporting the smaller institutions, the smaller theaters, the smaller performing arts organizations across the city that make really give this whole broad range of culture that can create a sense of belonging for anybody or any background. To be able to access the arts as well. I think there's also a responsibility to lean into education as well. Like I said in my opening comments, I distinctly remember a field trip from my elementary school, high school, early high school, to be able to experience arts, and that made an indelible impression on me. I think we have an opportunity to work with APS and continue some of the programs that the city of Atlanta has in terms of funding accessibility to our institutions for that experience. I also think we need to support the artists. I think that's one of the things is you hear the term starving artists all the time, and there's a reason for that, is that it is a passion profession, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. I think we, to the extent that we can provide programs that help support young, budding, aspiring artists, both in terms of technical skills, but also things like housing. I mean, and workspace that is real expensive in Atlanta. I think, these are just some of the examples that if we really value arts, which I believe District 6 does, then let's build that ecosystem and support that ecosystem that supports all arts organizations.
Thanks, both of you. You've both brought up the fact that funding for the arts falls into several categories across the nation, but particularly also in the city of Atlanta. So there are nonprofit and arts and cultural organizations that and some independent artists that rely a lot on public funding, but they really suffer from chronic under support. And I think anyone who works in the arts and culture community could talk to you about this for about 48 hours without ever getting tired about the struggles that are out there and how we can do better But I'm curious what you all think in terms of whose responsibility that is. How do we feed more funding into the arts, and who leads those efforts, and how do we go from words to action? And Alex, I'll hand you the mic here.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think as a community, we all have responsibilities. And if we're speaking specifically in terms of the government and city government, I know that the city of Atlanta has committed, a sizable amount to the arts. And I think we do work well with both Fulton County, which has an arts, the county government, which has an arts mandate as well. And then the state. So I do think we need to just continue coordinating that. Let's make sure we're not duplicating funding or overlapping funding, and then just bringing focus to what the overall objectives are. I do think we need to support the leading institutions, but then we need to lean on them to, again, support the rest of the community. And then I do think we need to kind of explore this notion of supporting those that are not as well resourced, both the individuals as well as the institutions. We also need to lean on our partners, things like the Atlanta Beltline, that isn't necessarily the city of Atlanta, but is a organization or an entity within the city of Atlanta. It too has been leaning in and supporting arts on the Beltline. So I think we need to continue seeking out opportunities and partnerships that way. And then finally, when I was on city council, we talked about, and I was in full support of this notion of a partial penny sales tax. I want to see a sustained source of funding. I don't like the notion of every year it's kind of in the budget, and then it's at risk for funding or not, depending on where we are. And I also don't like the notion of being able to rob those funds if at the whim of the administration or council. If we value this, if we prioritize it, then let's signal that by dedicating funding. And like I said, that to me is kind of a nice way of at least kind of showing some commitment. But I would also layer in the other focuses that I mentioned earlier.
Thanks. Katie, how do you weigh in on this?
Could you repeat the question for me one time?
Sure. We're talking about the fact that arts and culture institutions, as well as independent artists, are chronically underfunded in Atlanta. And I was asking about what the solution for this is. How do we, who leads the efforts? So how do we go from talking about the fact that arts and culture institutions and independent artists in Atlanta need more funding to actually making that happen?
Yes, and I think that City Council has a huge role to play here, as well as the mayor, of course. We do need to rely on the City Council if the mayor does not make it as much of a priority and has other goals. So we do need it to be there at the beginning of the conversation, and definitely in the budget as a percentage for every year that goes by. We need to find a way to find sustainable funding for the arts, because it is definitely my belief that it's not the standard of living, it's the quality of life. So you're going to learn more from your environment, and you're going to be more engaged in your environment if you have the historical representations, and you can see the history and you can see the arts in your environment. It's going to be harder to look past. So even though it seems like something that we can at the end of the day cut, it's the foundation of our culture, and it's the storytelling of the city that really needs to be told. A ton of people are moving into Atlanta, and we need to show them our pride, and we need to show them that this is a priority. And I think District 6 is definitely, happy to lead the way in that regard. But it's got to be our government's priority to make the arts and support the nonprofits and support the privately owned. Because they definitely know what they're doing. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just trying to make sure that they're supported. Again, as I was saying with the small businesses, every artist is a small business. They're selling themselves, and Atlanta supports Atlanta. So we want to be able to give them the tools to be their best selves. And actually just saw an artist on my Instagram say that she's no longer being fulfilled by art and is looking at other avenues. And it was kind of heartbreaking to see because she is so great at it. And I recognize there are times in life, but if she felt just a little bit more supported, I think Atlanta could have been a little bit better for that. So I want to help support them, and my voice in City Council will definitely be there for that.
Thanks, Katie. This question is a bit related, but maybe takes us down a slightly different path. There are people in the arts and culture world here in Atlanta doing heroic work as champions of the gig workers and the independent artists and creatives and their families who were so impacted by COVID-19's contracted economy. And I'm curious what you would do about that. What policies would you support that would address the needs of artists who have lost their way of life here thanks to COVID? Katie, why don't you take it?
Yes, especially our gig workers. I have a ton of being in the restaurant industry and just a young professional in Virginia Highland. I have a ton of gig worker friends who are not just doing a gig. This is their lifetime career, and they need the stability like anyone else because it's also a career path. We need to keep that in mind. I think that we can look to the movie industry and see how they supported their employees. They have a little bit more resources, but I think that they set a really good tone of having clear communication and also backup and also follow through and transparency with their processes. I think it was a time when no one knew really what we were going to do, but we knew that we were going to have to make it work. And I think our artists are always the ones that are going to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. So really we need to start there and start with housing and start with food and start with the basic necessities and making sure that they're making their life in Atlanta as stable as possible.
So one of the things that I noticed that other municipalities were doing that Atlanta was not doing, or as quick on the draw was supporting, when the COVID relief funds were going out, a lot of them were going to businesses like for-profit businesses. I'm a nonprofit executive, and so, I know the value of what that support could have looked like and what it would have meant for a nonprofit like us. I think that courtesy should have also been extended to the nonprofit sector, particularly to be able to cover the artists that fall into that category. I'm grateful that the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta, I believe they stood up a fund to support art as well during this time. And so I think, in other forums, I've talked about the need to really lift and support small businesses. My dad was a small business owner, and I just saw everything that he poured into it, everything that he risked, and the drive to keep that going and open. I said earlier, the arts is a passion profession, and because of that, artists are committed to it, and almost to the last second. That they'll just kind of keep fighting and hanging on, and the leveraging of their success and their business and their revenues and their economic impact out into the community is important. So, I feel like we missed a real opportunity there. And so to the extent that we continue to get funding and support from the federal government or the state, I think we need to really, again, refocus on small businesses and then the nonprofit sector. And then again, if arts is a priority, then we need to signal that by separating a tranche out of that specifically for that.
Arts is a passion profession often, Alex, and you yourself have told us that you found some passion for arts and culture as early as high school, and have gone on to work in side by side with arts and culture in the work that you're doing now. But if you were to become arts and culture also needs passionate defenders. Mm-hmm. And passionate protectors. And I'm a big believer in the why. So I'm curious about why you would be that kind of passionate advocate for arts and culture. What do you see that arts and culture bring or could bring to the city of Atlanta that would compel you to be the champion?
Yeah, I mean, to me, art, and I wish I were more creative than I am. I mean, and my mother would kill me because I took, 9 years of piano lessons, and it was, bless her heart for having to listen to all my practicing. But, um, but it's a form of expression, right? And it is a way of people sharing who they are, where they come from, their values, their just life experience, and the fact that they're willing to share that is such a blessing to the rest of us who can receive it. And I say that because it also creates a sense of belonging. And I think I said that earlier. It's this notion of, oh my gosh, I see a little bit of myself in that art. So, I bring that up because it's important to me. I grew up as my sister and I were the only two Chinese Americans or Asian Americans in my high school. And there were a lot of times that we felt very alone. But the arts world and that experience at the theater was just a way to experience others. And there were times that we wanted to share our culture with others as well, so they would understand a little bit more about us. I think that's where my passion comes from for arts. It's this notion of admiration and respect, because it's not in me, but also just this notion of it helps build community. It helps bring people together. It helps people feel like they're part of something and connect. And especially right now, after this year and a half of COVID, where we do feel so isolated and divided, could arts and should arts be the way that we find our way back? So, that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind in terms of why this would be important to me. But I think that's a very genuine answer to that question.
Thanks, Alex. Katie, what's your why? What would compel you to be a great champion for arts and culture, and what it can bring to District 6?
Yeah, I think my why I would be an advocate for the arts and culture in District 6 and Atlanta as a whole would be my why for exactly why I want to be city council representative. I know that it's a dream. People are starting art and they're seeing themselves transformed. And it's cliche to say that representation is everything, but it really is everything. And like Alex was talking about, just not having the representation, I want to be able to give the resources to the people doing the work at the ground floor that are making our city the cultural mecca that it is. And we need to lift them up so that the whole world can know. I was fortunate enough to get my master's in architecture and community design. And I remember my first still life class. And it's something you can learn. It's something that you don't have to stay on one medium. It can be creative writing. It can be in technology. It can be with acrylic paint. I know that when I purchase something from an artist, or I go to an artist market, and I give them my hard-earned money, and they just glow. Like, they just are so happy that their art was related through someone else. And I think that it's a lasting effect that creates a ripple, and that ripple will follow the person who purchased that piece of art. I mean, I feel like I personally follow Instagram artists, and I know their whole lives, and I try and support them as much as possible, even through just sharing things. I've always tried to lift small businesses and artists and people who are just passionate about making community and making something that really has a lasting effect.
So Katie, the last time that the city of Atlanta had a comprehensive arts and culture plan was in 2006, so 15 years ago. That's a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Katie, if you were asked to create an arts and culture policy plan for District 6, what would you include in it?
First, I would start with getting all of the players involved, especially Vote Atlanta and the Midtown Alliance, all of the parks all of the civic associations, the businesses associations. I know they say everyone's sick of a survey, but I think that once we can communicate the priority of art, we can really extend the vision across Atlanta. You know, art in Northeast Atlanta isn't gonna maybe look like art in Southwest Atlanta. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's not creating the same thing throughout, but having each individual voice be heard and create really the quilt of a strong cultural center.
Okay, Alex, what about you? If you were creating the arts and culture policy plan for District 6, what would be in that?
I think the first piece would be just an affirmation of the importance and the value that we as a city, as a district, place in the arts. And so I think we just need to come out and have that in writing and state that up front that this is going to be a priority. I think the next thing that I would look for to make sure that it was in there is a couple things. Number one is that it is comprehensive. It does include all sorts of arts, and it, you know, all the different media, the different just ways of expression that folks have, to make sure that we are, you know, recognize the breadth of arts that exist in our community. The next thing, it would be around how a commitment to support. And it would be a commitment to support both the institutions we've talked about, the organizations, not just through funding, not just through promotions, but also through facilities, making sure that we're committing to having world-class facilities and you know, available to everyone, and then down to the individuals in terms of how we can support those aspiring and budding and even established individuals and artists. And the third one, the last piece would just be kind of accountability. How are we going to make sure that there is some sort of way or group or council that will remain and make sure that this plan gets followed, gets updated, and that it continues to be a living, breathing document, but also pushes us to coordinate with those other stakeholders, the county as well as the state, and then potentially federal resources as well. So, you know, I think in order for any sort of plan to be successful, I would just expect all of those components to be in there to make it, you know, something that will work and will have a lasting impact.
Thank you both for telling us about how you would go to work on District 6. Thinking about Atlanta as the city as a whole, there are so many inequities within the arts and culture community in terms of how arts organizations are funded, which organizations get funding, which neighborhoods in the city are more likely to have arts and culture offerings available to them. I think that we've always been aware of these inequities, but they've become even more visible over the course of the past year and a half. And there's a real desire on the part of many to take this challenge on and do something about it. So I'm hoping that both of you might share your ideas on how those inequities could be addressed, and not only how, but who should lead the efforts to make sure that arts and culture are available to everyone in Atlanta. And who wants to go first?
I think since Katie went on first on the last question, so
Okay.
I'll take this one. You know, I'm glad you brought this question, this issue up, because you know, I know that we've talked about inequity or equity and diversity and inclusion on a number of other bases, you know, economic opportunity, education, but you're right, it does impact the arts as well. And I think, you know, we just have to say it and speak it and acknowledge it, and then figure out what our path forward is. You know, to me, I think it's the Office of Cultural Affairs and the mayor's office, if not the mayor, him or herself, would be the ideal person to really lead this conversation. I think it starts by, you know, what you got to do is just do a real hard analysis of what that inequity looks like quantitatively, so that you have metrics in order to figure out, are we making progress? So I think you start with taking kind of funds, you know, the funds that are being invested or provided to support the community. And let's look at where that, all the different slicers for which where that money is going, the size of the organization, demographics, you know, which communities, geographic, and other, because, you know, that's kind of what you do with, you know, systemic inequity as well. You start with just looking at what, taking inventory of what it really looks like. And I think from there, we'll get a very clear roadmap. It's going to be, okay, there are communities, geographic communities that have traditionally been underinvested. Guess what? They need to be the priority going forward. There may be cultural or ethnic topics or subjects or types of institutions that are underrepresented, and we got to invest in that. There might be types of arts, kind of like I was talking about, that need to be supported or deserve additional support. And then we also have to look at the size of the organization. We can't continue to concentrate all the funding in those organizations or entities that are already well resourced. But by building out that matrix, it just kind of gives you a good roadmap. But more importantly, it allows you to see what progress you're making over time. Again, I think the Office of Cultural Affairs would be great if we do a comprehensive arts plan and do build some sort of arts council that is cross-jurisdictional. Then to me, that becomes an even better a facilitator of this work and to track the progress going forward. Because at that point, they have all the stakeholders at the table, and it's not just one entity trying to lead the change. And yeah, that's what I would do.
Thanks, Alex. Katie, how about you?
I think we could link it very easily with our infrastructure. I think for me, I'm plan to be on the transportation and community development committees in the city council. And I think that as a community designer, I think art is integral with transportation. It's integral with our greenways. And I've been working with the Beltline. Wayfinding is one of the major ways that we're working to connect our neighborhoods. And I think art and having landmark directional amenities would just be amazing. I think, like Alex was saying, we think about inequity in multitudes of government. And I think just putting it at the base level of every piece of our puzzle, I think it's going to be the best way to integrate arts in a more intentional way. Once you have that foundation of the arts and of the play in the city, it really sets the tone, and it can make really a life of happiness. That is what we're looking for. We're looking to set ourselves apart from other cities, and other cities have put art on the map and they've made it a priority. And I think it's an easy way for Atlanta to put ourselves on the map of great transportation, which we need to fix, because the perception of Atlanta from the outside in is not the perception of Atlanta from the inside out. Atlanta thinks we're pretty good. Okay, if you look at other cities and their representation of us as well, we really need to do a 180 from what we've been doing. This is a priority, and transportation is an easy way to integrate art into our city.
Thanks, Katie. And just a point of clarification, are you suggesting that you would align arts with transportation so that transportation would be leading this examination of inequity in the arts, or are you thinking of someone else as the leader?
No, excellent question. I think that they should be definitely at the table. And if there's Invest Atlanta or T-SPLOS money going into transportation, that should have a section of their funds directly going to public art.
Okay, thank you. I do not have further questions. Nicole, do we have questions from the audience?
Hey, we do not have any questions right now. Folks in the audience, you are welcome to post them in the Q&A or in the chat. Otherwise, we can sign off and give you lovely folks 20 minutes more of your evening.
Thank you, Alex and Katie, for your thoughtful answers. And your succinct conversations. It's terrific to get more insight into your thoughts about arts and culture in Atlanta.
Well, thank you for hosting us. It was it was a lot of fun kind of exploring these topics. So yeah, I look forward to more.
Yeah, I'll definitely be sure to reach out afterwards. Thank you guys so much for hosting. And Laura, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you, Nicole, as well.
All right, thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks.